Okay, Chris Peaks here today with Attorney Chris Christie, who was the 2018 candidate for Attorney General. Here with me this morning to discuss some politics. Chris, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm excellent. So, what made you decide to go into law?
Uh, I I knew when I was in high school I was going to be a lawyer, both because of my uh, the way I thought about things, the way I analyzed things, and would structure arguments. I would have people tell me, you've got to be a lawyer, and then just the ability to impact people's lives as a lawyer, representing them. So, when I was in high school, I mean, when I picked where I went to college, it was because I was planning on going to law school.
Now, what kind of law do you actually focus on? I know you mentioned something about doing death penalty cases earlier, but do you have something that's your primary?
In terms of what I get paid to do, in a broad sense, it's business litigation.
Okay.
I represent businesses when they sue each other. Tends to be, I've had a lot of cases that have financial experts, maybe statistical experts. I've represented a number of healthcare providers in business litigation, and I've also tried two cases where the Department of Justice was on the other side in civil fraud, False Claims Act cases, Medicare fraud, representing the defendants. And I've handled a lot of pension litigation. I've represented the retirement systems of Alabama, the Tennessee Valley retirement system, lots of private pension plans, and some other employee benefit plans. That's what I do, what I've been paid for. But I've also spent a lot of my time, probably 20%, if you want to look at that over my career of my time, doing pro bono work. Most of that has been representing people on death row, inmates on death row. I've got two cases right now where I'm representing prisoners who have been abused by correctional officers, by guards in the Alabama state prisons. I've done a lot of that in the past also. And then, the two things I guess that I'm known for is, just business litigation, particularly representing pension plans, and then also doing pro bono work, particularly prisoners in Alabama's prisons.
So let me ask you something. When somebody's convicted and sentenced to death and you appeal, are you appealing for the death penalty and to overturn the conviction at the same time, or are those two different issues?
You do both at the same time, and they're two different issues. So all of my, except for one matter, okay, all of my death row representation has been after the inmate has been convicted and had his initial appeal to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. And then I've handled the post-conviction process, the Rule 32 proceeding, which is the state version of a habeas corpus proceeding, and then the federal habeas corpus proceedings. So I've never tried a death penalty case in the original case, but I have had a lot of Rule 32 trials, which is your state habeas corpus trials, where you're challenging, a lot of the times the argument is ineffective assistance of counsel.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
All right. Other arguments is the prosecution didn't turn over evidence that they were supposed to. Usually those cases turn on sentencing issues as opposed to guilt issues. But you do challenge the conviction and the death sentence at the same time.
So, from my understanding, if on the conviction it goes to the Criminal Court of Appeals, if they uphold it, the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear it. Is that correct?
Well, the funny thing is that there's two different Supreme Courts that you could be talking about. You have almost all of these cases I'm talking about are state of Alabama convictions. All right. And then you have the original appeals, which could go up to the Alabama Supreme Court, although they rarely grant certiorari and hear it in the Alabama Supreme Court, but they do a lot of times. They have the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. Then post-conviction, you file a Rule 32 petition, and then you have another trial, and that goes up to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals and can go up to the Alabama Supreme Court. If those all rule against you, which every single case I've ever seen, the eventually the Alabama Supreme Court upholds what the trial court, the original trial court conviction. Then you file a federal habeas corpus petition, and you can go then from the 11th Circuit to the United States Supreme Court.
So that brings up a question. Would it be better? I see these justices running for the Criminal Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court, and they have mottos like upholding law and order and so on. So, I mean, is that something they should be running on? Is upholding law and order, or as opposed to interpreting what the law is?
Well, upholding law and order is a good position, and people ought to do that. But it's funny how upholding law and order is not part of what you hear today from some politicians who are being prosecuted. There needs to be justice, okay? And sometimes that requires there's some people that need to be in prison because they're dangerous.
Right.
But I have never seen a rich person who had a death sentence. And that's because with good representation, you're not going to be convicted, or if you are convicted, you're not going to receive the death penalty. Every case that I've been involved in, and I'm talking 27 different death penalty cases, okay? Every single one of those had serious issues about the sentencing phase where it was not handled well. I'm not saying that there aren't cases that were handled well, but all of the ones that I've looked at, that I was involved in, of the different people that I either represented or supervised other lawyers who were representing. So when I say 27, I wasn't personally representing 27 people. My firm did, though, and I supervised that representation. We got 6 people off of death row. 5 of those were sentencing issues, and 1 of those was an innocence issue. And so the one person that I'm talking about was freed, but the others, there was just huge problems with their sentencing.
When you mentioned that about the death penalty cases, it seems from what I've read that females and white males are more or less likely to get it than black defendants. Is there bias towards female or racism towards blacks when it comes to sentencing, or do you have an opinion on that?
My firm did represent, and I was not involved in this particular one, did represent one woman who was on death row, who had her sentence commuted, and this was back in the late 80s, before I was sort of responsible at my former firm for this type of work. Almost all, and by that, well over 95% of the people on death row are men, and greatly disproportional number are African-American, black or people of color. I don't know those statistics now. At one time I did. I will tell you that it's different than it used to be. All right. And so one of the men that I represented on death row, the crime was in 86. He was convicted in 87 and sentenced in 88. And the understanding in the county that he was from was that the reason why they had gone after the death penalty for him because he had a white girlfriend. I mean, it realized that was just sort of the accepted talk on the street, and this is in the late 80s, that the reason why they went, there were 2 people who were involved in the same robbery. And the guy who actually was the one who started the robbery, I mean, all the evidence showed that the second guy started the robbery, was the one who had the bigger gun. Both of them ended up having guns, and both of them shot their guns at the store owner that shot them also. But the planner, the mastermind of the robbery, did not get the death penalty, and the other guy did. And why did the other guy get the death penalty? The one who wasn't the driver and the one who hadn't planned the robbery and ended up being part of the crime. And the understanding was it's because he had a white girlfriend.
Wow. And one of the questions I want to ask for is, I see so many cases, like I love Dateline, and I see stuff come up and I will watch this and I'll be like, and there's so so much reasonable doubt, that's bringing points that I would have a hard time convicting these people. And it seems just like every jury on these things, they always come back and they convict. Do you think that some these jurors go in there with like their mind made up, or they're wanting to hold somebody accountable, or there's a reason why so many of them come back guilty when it seems there's reasonable doubt in so many of these cases?
That's really hard to comment on.
Yeah, I know it's a tough question because I can't just I can't figure these things out. And
I will tell you this. I think the jury system that we have in the United States is a terrible system. And on the other hand, I think it's the best criminal justice process that you can have. They're just, the nature of handling criminal matters is just very difficult. And the jury system has flaws, but it is better than any other system you're going to come up with. I know that I've tried civil jury cases, right, where we interviewed the jurors afterwards, and one of the jurors told me that they knew that the judge had given them instructions, but they didn't pay attention to those instructions because they knew what their job was to figure out how much money to award the other party. And I mean, I was surprised to have an individual juror tell me that all of the jurors intentionally didn't pay attention to the jury instructions.
do you think that like like I'm a big trial buff, and I remember my favorite one was the Robert Blake murder trial. Do you think that even with the high profile lawyers, that some of these juries get starstruck when they come back with acquittals in some of these cases because of the people who are on trial or the attorney who's representing them?
Those types of trials that you're talking about, ones where you've got celebrities or that get all that kind of media attention, are such a small percentage of the number of criminal cases and even of the criminal trials that it's really hard to draw any kind of overall assumptions and analysis from the kind of cases that get the media attention. Your typical case, you've got somebody in jail who pleads guilty to get a lesser sentence. And, well over 90, probably 98% of the criminal convictions are guilty pleas. And then even of the cases that try, you just don't have the kind of attention that people see when they watch on TV. I mean, so those cases are so rare, they're 1 in a million. And so I don't really think you can draw assumptions or thoughts about the entire criminal justice process from the cases that get media attention.
Okay, fair enough. So 2018, you decided to run for Attorney General. What made you decide to jump into that race?
At the time, we had a governor removed, we had a Speaker of the House convicted, and there was just so much corruption in the state of Alabama, in the state of government. And my own view was the way to address that was to have a Democrat as Attorney General, and you were going to have all the Republicans in statewide office. And of course, you got to remember that was right after Doug Jones had just won. Doug Jones won in December 2017, and so I decided to run right after that, and so was running in 2018. And it didn't work out the way I expected it to. But it was just how do you get state government to change, right? I mean, Alabama is last or almost last in every measure that you can put forward about quality of life, education, criminal justice, healthcare. I mean, everything the state government's responsible for, we're last or almost last. And it's because the state government's not well run. And, how do you get that to start changing? Well, one place you can start is going after the corruption that you have in state government. It's interesting, since the current Attorney General has been the Attorney General, there have been almost no prosecutions of state leaders. And is that just because everybody all of a sudden started behaving correctly?
That's not what I've heard. That the reason that.
Well, I mean, what is the reason? Right? I mean, think about it. We had,
I mean,
Luther Strange is, I thought
my
was a good
opinion,
attorney general.
somebody must have said, "Don't investigate." And that would be my guess.
And all right, so Luther Strange is one of my former law partners. And I think he made a mistake in accepting the Senate nomination while he was attorney general because of the appearance of impropriety. But knowing him, I don't think that there was anything in his heart that was wrong about that.
Yeah, that's what killed his, because they looked at the voters seeing it as a steal to, and
Looked wrong.
Yeah, and the voters reacted. But yeah, I mean, there's
Notice,
been
he was prosecuting people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he was no longer attorney general, that ended. So either everybody in Montgomery changed the way they were doing things because he was no longer attorney general, or we're just not having prosecutions of people who are doing things they're not supposed to do.
I think what you just said, we're just not having prosecutions because things that I've seen over this time, I'm like, how was this? How are you people getting away with this? It's like, to me, it's like everybody's in on it, and they're just waiting for somebody to take the fall. Like, honestly, I think I'm not going to name names, but former attorney generals, judges, what have you, will tell you straight up, Governor Siegelman got a raw deal.
Well, I will say this. I don't think that, the process works to some extent. Okay. And so Siegelman got convicted. And if you have any faith in the process, then he did something he wasn't supposed to do. But if you look at what he did compared to what Bentley did, I mean, so, Siegelman's problem was the allegations against him is that he accepted money in a way he shouldn't have to cover a debt that wasn't his.
Had every other governor not done the same thing about the Con Board?
And in contrast, you've got Bentley. Bentley has state troopers intimidating people who've been witnesses to his affair with his chief of staff. All right. Now, which is a more criminal matter, which deserves more jail time? I mean, so clearly you can see the difference between the way Bentley was treated and Siegelman was treated, that Siegelman was dealt a raw deal.
Yeah. And let me ask you another case that's kind of all ties in that together. When, Langford, he was involved. So, but he made a point out after he was convicted, and he said that they was accusing him of giving Bill Blunt $7 million, and he said something. If I gave Bill Blunt $7 million, you bet I would have had $3.5 million of it. I mean, it seems like from what I've told that Larry pissed the wrong people off, and they went after him.
Well, I wasn't part of making those decisions. I will tell you that there's a lot of appearance of that. But if you think about it, there were 6 or 7 people on the Jefferson County Commission who were all went to prison from that same time period. So to some extent, yeah, they went after Langford, but they went after everybody else that was on the Jefferson County Commission during that time period too.
Yeah. I mean, I can just go down and start naming all of them. Let me ask you one thing about Langford trial too. Why? And I was told this by, and I don't think you care about names. It's been started. You know Derek Collins?
I'm sorry.
Do you know Derek Collins?
I don't.
Yeah, he's a criminal defense attorney, and he told me that him and Emory Anthony,
who I do know,
offered.
I do know Derek. I'm sorry. Yeah, I do know Derek. I'm sorry.
Okay.
When you said Emory Anthony, yes, I do know him, but it's not somebody I know well.
He said that they offered to represent Langford pro bono, and they were going to live and die in Birmingham. And then Langford went and hired that ex-federal judge and moved the trial to Tuscaloosa. I was like, why on earth did you move that to Tuscaloosa? They moved out of Birmingham.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I mean, I thought that was a mistake, but
I mean, he was
it's
beloved
a
in
judgment call.
Birmingham. I mean, yeah. I mean, so so when you raced with against Joseph Ziegler, what was your slogan? Was you campaigning on cleaning up corruption? I mean, did you have a message you was trying to deliver to the voters?
Oh, you're asking me ancient history now. I had three things. I'm trying to remember: corruption, criminal justice reform, and I'm trying to remember what the third one is right now. The criminal justice reform, really, for me personally, was probably the biggest part of it. The Alabama prisons, the state's prisons are awful, and they're poorly run. And the criminal justice system in Alabama, we've got too many of our young men in prison, and we don't provide them the resources, the reentry services that they would need, so when they get out of prison, they can stay out of prison. And so we have a really high recidivism rate because of not doing the things we need to do with people while they are in prison. So we keep them in too long. We don't provide the services that we should so that when they get out of prison, they can stay out of prison. The prisons themselves are hellholes. Just to be frank with you, they're terribly dangerous and unnecessarily. The only thing you really learn when you're in prison is how to commit more crimes and be violent, because that's how violent our prisons are. I mean, we have, I know the statistics change over time, but I know at one time when I studied this, we had twice as many people die from homicides and suicides in Alabama prisons as the next highest state in the country. 4 times higher than average, twice as high as the next highest state. Okay. Now think about what I was telling you. So we have people dying of violent means, either suicide or a homicide, twice the rate of the next highest state. Now, what does that tell you about our prisons?
Wow, I've never heard those stats right there before.
All right, I'll tell you another thing about it, which people don't really realize. We don't prosecute people who commit crimes in prison. Almost never. Not
Really?
Yes. So if you're a prisoner and you stab another prisoner, right? You try to kill him. You don't get prosecuted for that. All right. And so the consequence,
wow.
the consequence of that is that the most dangerous, I mean, who is the most dangerous prisoner in the state of Alabama? That would be a prisoner who would try to kill another prisoner, whether it's retaliation for a slur, whether it's to get money from them, whether it's a gang initiation type of thing, whatever it is, right? A prisoner in Alabama prisons who will try to kill another prisoner is the type of dangerous person who you can't let back out in society. But because we don't prosecute prisoners for trying to kill other prisoners, those people get out. Those people are released. So we don't keep the people who should be in prison, and we let out people who shouldn't be let out. And yet for the typical person, I mean, I remember there was a man who came up and talked to me who had a second conviction. He had been convicted of shoplifting, and he had gotten a felony charge because frankly, he shouldn't have been, but it wasn't handled correctly. And then he got convicted when he was a senior in college for marijuana possession. And because of the amount of marijuana that he had, which was really not that much, it was considered trafficking. Okay. And so he got a 9-year sentence. He spent 8 years in prison. All right. For marijuana possession.
That was going to be I was fixing to go there in just a second. Let me ask you one question first. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot because I actually kind of agree with the man. With criminal justice reform, should it be something along the line of like what Bernie Sanders was talking about, how we almost have a pay system? You know, we have to pay for a bondsman to get out. You know, they're making money out. It shouldn't be.
Well, first of all, bail bondsmen really are not providing a service that is particularly helpful to the community. My master's thesis was on bail reform. And so I had an honors thesis as an undergraduate and a master's thesis. I've got a master's degree in public policy. And release on recognizance and bail were the topics of my theses. And people who are released on their own recognizance are more likely to return to trial than people who are released after paying a bail bondsman, because the bail bondsman don't do anything other than collect a fee. And so the thing with the bail bondsman is you end up having some people sit in jail before they get convicted of any crime. And then a lot of people plead guilty because they end up spending so much time in prison before their trial comes up that they can plead guilty and get released immediately, or they can not plead guilty and stay in prison for 6 more months until their trial comes up. That's a very common situation. Now, so we need bail reform also. I'll just be frank with you. That's another area where we need reform, but that's a small part of the criminal justice reform. Most of what I'm really talking about is, no, there are in Jefferson County, right? Jefferson County, we have a lot of diversion programs and the type of programs that are trying to steer people so that I know David Carpenter, Judge Carpenter in the Bessemer Division is real big on, having programs where rather than just sending people to prison, you do things, you try to help them. And he's had really good results with people not coming back to his courtroom because of the ability to, get people on a different path in their life. All right. So we need to do those kind of things at the front end. We need to not put people in there so long. We need to have the prisons not to be such a hellhole that the only thing that people learn there is how to be violent. We need to do things where, people get their GED or people learn skills. So when they get released, they can get a good job. And right now, typically, not always, right? But typically somebody gets out of prison and they're just hit the street. All right. So they've got felony convictions. They have really hard time to get the job and they have no skills.
They're going to go back
to have to do to get food.
They're going to commit crimes again.
Yes. I mean, it's crazy that we do that.
So
now, let me tell you this, Sheriff Petway in Jefferson County has really tried to make some good steps along the direction of the people that are in his jails when they get out, having jobs, getting some training, life skills, those kinds of things. Sheriff Petway has done a great job.
Let me say something before I ask this question, and to commend him, especially with the way his deputies are trained. I got stopped several years back when Sheriff Helms in office, and the deputy comes up the window and tells me to get out of the vehicle. So I comply. Sorry, I had a phone call come in. So he orders me to come to the back of the vehicle. Of course, I comply. Hands on the vehicle. He starts searching. He's not asked for an ID. He's not asked what I do. So he starts searching me. He says, "Do you have any weapons on you?" I said, "Yes, there's a .38 revolver on the inside of the door." So he runs against the revolver and starts calling in. I said, "Hey, deputy, would you like to see my license and concealed carry permit before you start calling that in?" And he looked at me like I had two heads. And so sorry, second part goes back, searches the vehicle. I mean, everything goes through it. So comes back, pats me down again, second time, then goes back to the vehicle and goes, "Tell me where the drugs are at, or I'm calling the dogs." I said, "Call the dogs out here." I said, "You ripped my vehicle apart. You searched me twice." He goes, "Well, what are you doing in this neighborhood?" I said, "I was cutting through here to go to that used tire store because I got a donut hole here and I need a new tire." So, I mean, it's obviously that was an illegal search and seizure by all means. Because I asked him, I said, "Why'd you stop me?" Because he said, "You didn't have a seatbelt on." Okay, that stopped me, but you hit that total about. But anyway, last summer I got stopped and my back was hurting, legs was hurting. Guy runs me. And he comes back and he says, "Do you have anything on you that I need to know about?" And I always think it's funny when they ask that question because, like, what are you going to say? Yeah or no, you don't need to know about it. But I said, "No, I don't have anything on me, deputy." He goes, "Then you wouldn't mind me searching you and patting you down?" And I said, "No." He said, "No, you wouldn't mind?" "No, I can't." I said, "No, you can't." I said, "You don't have reason for probable cause." And I'm not consenting to a search. And he said, have a nice evening. And yeah, but a lot of people don't know that, you don't have to do that. But sorry, I just wanted to, commend him
Contrast.
for, yeah, for how he has his deputies trained to uphold the Constitution as opposed to the last one. Now, you mentioned marijuana a while ago. Ever since the war on drugs started up under Ronald Reagan, we have wasted treasure and lives and accomplished nothing. To me, the drug laws are so draconian that I don't even know where to begin. Um, First, is it not time that we totally legalized marijuana and taxed it? And and I'm not uh, supportive legalizing hard drugs, but if somebody gets caught with, a gram of cocaine or something, it, isn't there something to do besides put them in prison and give them a felony?
There should
The
be.
first time?
There should
Yeah.
be. I mean, they need, look, either what they're doing isn't bothering anybody, or it is bothering people and they need to get treatment. Either way, I, you know, taxing marijuana probably would be a good revenue source for state government. We could probably lower income taxes. But yeah, um,
I mean, I've known so many people who got caught with just a little bit of, hard drugs or something. I mean, and they weren't dealers, and then, they get felonies and it's on the record for it. And I'm like, couldn't we, they went through some kind of program or something? I just think there's a better way to handle that than to, uh, the
well, all right. So some counties in Alabama do handle those kind of things where they have a drug court, right?
Mhm.
And they handle things in such a way that is designed to make sure that the people get back on track or whatever needs to happen. You do have some counties. I know Houston County, for example, is particularly draconian in their approach. But if you've got political connections, you get treated less. You get treated more leniently than you would in Jefferson County. If you don't have political connections, then you get treated really harshly. And now I'm saying that based on my knowledge about what was going on there 5 years ago, and I'm assuming it's still the same. But there was, it's different areas of the state treat those kinds of issues differently, and there's a real difference from one area to another.
Now, in your race with Joe Siegelman, I remember it. I remember y'all running, but I guess I was more focused on the race between General King and General Marshall because it was just so brutal. Did your race turn dirty, or
No,
did
it
y'all
really wasn't. I mean,
I didn't think it did.
well, I mean, I hate to say this, but I am sure that somebody could make up something to say about me that is not true, that would be scandalous. Right. But there's really not anything that you can say or point in my life that it would be true and would be scandalous. And Joe Siegelman's sort of the same way, but I wouldn't have gone dirty anyway. Joe Siegelman's a great guy. I think that unfortunately, the name Siegelman at the time that he ran was gold in the Democratic primary and poison in the general election.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like somebody was asking me about that the other day, and I said, I don't. It depends on who you ask when it comes down to Governor Siegelman. What your opinion of him is. Some people love him, and some people.
I thought Governor Siegelman was a great governor. I like him personally. He was in an unfortunate situation and I think was abused in the way that he was sentenced. And but the general public perception of him for people who are not Democratic Party regulars is negative. And the name is very difficult outside the Democratic Party, and inside the Democratic Party, it's very powerful.
I've I've had some Republicans say this, that they felt that Governor Siegelman got a raw deal and all that. I just I've seen so many other governors get away with things like they get away with so much more. for him to get that. Governor Siegelman used to send me a Christmas card every year, back until all that happened. So I wish him well. So
what got Siegelman really was the way Scrushy got the money to the whatever it was that borrowed the money for the lottery. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Scrushy used two companies that owed Health South money to get the money, wrote off debt to Health South to get the money to pay off the loans that for the lottery PAC still had. And that the way that that money got laundered made it look much worse than it was. And I think that, frankly, Siegelman was as much of a victim of Scrushy as he was of anybody else.
It seems to me, since I've been doing this and stuff that I've seen, that if we wanted to launch a investigation into every politician in our state, everybody would be in prison for some type of violation here, violation there. I mean, I've seen it.
I hear that, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's true. I think that you're going to have. I mean, Jeff McLaughlin, who's a friend of mine, I know that Reckon, I think, did a piece on him as being the most honest politician in the state of Alabama. You ought to try to see if you can find that. And
I was probably unfair saying everybody, but because I know several guys that I find honest, but I'm sorry so forgive me for saying that, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No, that was fine. I just I'm sure you've got Republicans and Democrats both who are as honest as they can be. Now the difference right now, though, right, is that the politicians who are in it for themselves, who are in it for the power, they're not going to be Democrats right now, right? Because you don't really have any power as a Democrat. If you're in it for the power, if you're in it for what you can do for yourself, you're going to be a Republican right now in the state of Alabama. A few months ago, the Republican Party, and I wrote a piece on this, which it's almost like they are making the power grab almost for the inner circle, almost like the Politburo did. Like they said, if they started to do it party wide, but it ended up being just for state board members, that if anybody accepted money from AEA, they were going to be removed from the Republican Party. Now, if you run against a Republican or something, you can't run for 6 years. When you used to switch parties. Well, so my question is, should we not kick people off the ballot if they are accepting money from the Porch Creek Indians when the legislature, the Supreme Court justices, the Attorney General, and the governor are all accepting money from them, while at the same time ruling against casino gambling, keeping the lottery bills out? The Porch Creek Indians are representing the people that they represent, and they're entitled to their representation. If you're going to take that position, then you're going to have to say that you can't accept money from Blue Cross and Blue Shield and do have any legislation that you're going to vote on involving health insurance, and you're not going to be able to vote on any legislation you're not going to be able to accept money from Alabama Power Company and not vote on any legislation that impacts what they do. I mean, let's face it, who do the public service commissioners get most of their money from? The Public Service Commission gets all of their funding from the power utility companies, who in turn get it from the consumers. So the consumers are funding the utility company, or funding the Public Service Commission indirectly. And have you ever heard of the hidden tax? Hidden tax? Yeah. Well, if by that you mean the amount that we pay in electric bills in Alabama, yeah, I've heard it described that way. We pay. So Alabama Power Company has the highest guaranteed rate of return in the country. Right. But 12%. The problem really, that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that there's no investigation as to what that return is based on. All right. So the Johnson Steam Plant in downtown Birmingham, they've been piddling with that thing forever. But all the money they spend on it, they get that 13% return.
So there's no reason not to continue to waste money on the Johnson steam plant.
I was just going to get
it's
I'm
a
sorry.
place they were going to turn into a food court or something. I don't know what the plans. They've had different plans for it, but it's a big brick building downtown, and it's a capital project, and they always get 13% return on whatever they spend on it every year.
I've written several articles on this. At the end of every year, you will hear Twinkle Kavanaugh come out and say, "I gave $12 million back to the general fund." No, you didn't. You never got any money from the general fund to begin with. What they're doing is they're overcharging each month on the power bill, and it goes into a fund. And there's a law that says the legislature can after some months, the legislature can authorize you to give it to the legislature. It doesn't say you have to; it says you can authorize it. Instead of each month giving it back to Alabama where it goes into the general fund, and they're turning around using that money to build pet projects in North Alabama to take care of everybody. I think I've figured up since she's been in office is almost $140 million taxes we put on the state of Alabama through this right here that you're paying through your power bill every month.
Yeah.
So every time you get a rate increase, and I'll send you the article that I wrote on that. But let me go back to something real quick.
So that's on top of the fact of the guaranteed return that Alabama Power Company gets with being, 13% guaranteed return.
13% guaranteed return, and that formula they came up with that formula when Twinkle became commissioner. Her and Commissioner Oden developed that formula. The rest of the nation is around 6%. They have a 38% profit margin more than their sister company, Georgia Power.
Right.
You know that? So
I knew it was more. 38%. I knew it was something in that range. Yeah.
When I send this to you, you're gonna be amazed. I've got calls about this all the time. But all right, so but the gambling thing though is there was a justice in July of 2022. He received money from the political action committee that received money from the Porch Creek Indians that had money coming out of Sports Alliance out of Vegas. And then in September of 22, they ruled against Whitehall Bingo. All the other justices had money from them. General Marshall received money from them. Is that not a conflict of interest when you have people who are
there's a difference between being illegal and a conflict of interest?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of conflict of interest is probably legal. Look.
Yeah, no, I'm not accusing anybody of being illegal. I'm just
all right. Well, let me tell you this. One of the things that really bothers me, if you'll look at the contributions to the members of the Alabama Supreme Court, they're not running for office, and they'll get like $10,000 contributions from people. Now you have to wonder, all right, so you're not currently running for office and you get a $10,000 contribution. Why would somebody give you $10,000? Think of a reason that makes sense. If you're not currently running for office, you've got a campaign still out there. And of course, with that money, they can do things like attend conferences, and there's all kinds of things, that you can do with that type of money besides spending on a campaign. Why would Alabama Supreme Court justices be getting $10,000 from somebody? From a law firm. From a law firm that has cases in front of the Alabama Supreme Court.
Well, yeah, that's what I asked a former good friend of mine we spoke about earlier the other day, and he alluded to the same thing. He said, they're taking care of their buddies. Come right out and say it. Yeah. Is there a way to take this PAC money, or reduce how much somebody can give, or because in 2022, I think Alabama Power funded a war chest of $4 million to go to the candidates that they wanted to go against. Brent Woodall, a guy who I was supporting then, who lost the runoff by 4%, he was outspent 7-1. You can't compete with that.
Usually you can't. There are rare exceptions.
And then when you have what's supposed to be are honest news journals here in the state, Yellowhammer News, they was running hit pieces on him, and I remember the title was written by I can't remember if it was my, most time they have staff writers, they're not brave enough to put their name on it, but it said something like, liberal environmentalists, by the way, which I've never seen one, and I don't even know which one they is. I guess they just come every time a public service commission race is open. The liberal environmentalists flock to Alabama, but it said liberal environmentalist Brent Woodall tied to Bernie Sanders, and it was like a 6-degree separation. He took a donation from a guy named Nelson Brooks, who belonged to the Black Warrior Riverkeeper, who had a member of there that donated to a PAC that donated to Bernie Sanders. So therefore, Brent Woodall was now a liberal environmentalist that was trying to take away coal in Alabama.
Right. Who was the former public service commissioner who they had the college students from Mississippi show up at his event and were protesting supposedly in support of him on environmental issues? Do you not remember that story? The Matrix is the ones that put him up to it.
Terry Dunn?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had privy through somebody that I had the information of what they planned out. When they decided they was going to get rid of him, they had a surgical plan done where they was going to target the top 1,000 Republican donors, and then the next 10,000 most influential Republicans in the state, and then the most 100,000 likely Republican voters in the primary. And they went after him where they campaigned. We call it Terry Dunn, to get him off there, all because he asked for open rate hearings. There's not been open rate hearings done in 40 years in the state of Alabama.
40 is a little too long because they did it in the 80s, late 80s, because I attended some of them. Oh,
late 80s? Okay. All right. My bad. I mean, mistake.
It's over 30 years is accurate. Over 30 is definitely accurate. I used to represent Alabama Gas.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, my firm did, and I was the younger lawyer who, I mean, it wasn't my client, but I did the work. I did almost all the legal work because I was the associate on the file in the late 80s. But yes.
And, you know, and it's $100,000 a year job. They work 1 day a month, get a state car, cell phone, and everything else. I mean, why would you want another higher office if you get that job right there? Do you think it should be abolished and the legislature should have pick it, or should they at least be term limited? I mean, Twinkle Cavanaugh's going for her 5th term on this when she counts the 1 term she had before she defeated Lucy Baxley.
You know, there's positions, whether it's public service commission or judicial positions, there's reasons to have it be elected. There's reasons not to have it be an elected position.
So let me ask you about this right here. Now, personally, I know a lot of Republicans who just cannot stand her and voted against her. I kind of like the lady. I voted for Governor Ivey. What do you think of the job that she's done as governor? I mean, has it been positive for the state? I mean, she's somebody that let me say her. They portray an image of her that you can't dislike. I mean, it reminds you of Aunt Bee. I mean,
all right. So the different things I can tell you is that one, Governor Ivey has had a much better administration anyway than Bentley did. You know, Bentley's administration was a mess. They couldn't block and tackle. They couldn't do the basic things that the governor's office was supposed to do. The Governor Ivey's office does those things, right? Now, has she done anything other than just do the things that you're normally supposed to do? I mean, remember back in Governor Riley's administration, he had ideas and plans and things that I mean, whether you agreed with him or not, he had things that he wanted to accomplish that would make the state of Alabama better. Has there been any idea that Governor Ivey's office has pushed that would make the state of Alabama better? I mean, I can't think of anything that she's done. Now, on the other hand, she does at least get the budget done and appoint the people that are supposed to be in certain positions. And so she does get the basic blocking and tackling down. Now, is she doing that personally, or does she appoint people who are competent to handle that part of it? All right. And so in a lot of ways, it's sort of funny. The people are talking about compare her to Biden. Okay. I mean, I could tell you from having conversations with Governor Ivey that Biden is a whole lot more competent than Governor Ivey is. I mean, if you meet with Governor Ivey, and it's late in the day, she can't remember where she was in that morning.
I've heard people tell me that that her memory was really going.
But look, she's a nice lady, and yes, she's done a good job. I mean, it's sort of not a great job because she hasn't done anything to improve the state of Alabama, and we're again last, only in the things that matter like education and healthcare and criminal justice.
When you mentioned that, I think we have like I want to say, we were like 25th or something. I don't know what the number is, but as far as money, that tax revenue, where we ranked as tax revenue. And, and like you said, we're dead last. We're 52nd in dental care behind the territories.
Dental care?
Yeah. Like we're behind.
I'm aware of that. I actually represent the Dental Association.
I mean, and that's just, and we talk about education. I don't know what it is now, but I remember one time we were ranked like 25th or 26th in per dollars that were spent, and we're just not getting any return.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true because, it depends on how you count how much money we have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree that more money is not just alone isn't an answer, although you can't get the things done you want to do without more money. If you look at the money that we spend on education, you've got to look at the sources, and you got to compare apples to apples. And I think a lot of the times when you look at the amount of money we spend on education, you're not looking at apples to apples because the way other states raise their money is not counted the same way as we raise our money.
It seems like the past few years, and this has been going on, forever, but they keep bringing back up a lottery bill. And then I was reading the other night on this thing that per capita, Alabama is one of the largest sports betting places in the nation. And they said that if we legalized that alone would bring $10 million a year into the state. I mean, are we missing the boat on gambling issues as the rest of the nation passes us by?
My personal views on gambling are funny because I don't like gambling. I think gambling is basically a tax on the poor for the most part.
I agree. It's a backdoor tax.
And I don't like it. On the other hand, if people are going to gamble, then we might as well use the money to benefit the state in lieu of taxes, as opposed to have a quasi-criminal system out there where you got bookies and stuff who are making the money instead. So
that's my thoughts exactly. Like, if we had a lottery here, I might buy a ticket. I mean, occasionally, but these people that go in there and spend hundreds of dollars on it, no, I wouldn't be doing something like that. And you're right, because I remember Governor James, when he was running for election, called it a deceitful tax. And when you think about it, it really is. But against the people who it affects the most. But like I said, when you get,
one of the things that I've done, I worked at a dog track when I was in college. And, it was a part-time job where you could show up on a intermittent basis, right? Like just the weekends or something. And I worked myself through college. And so I was, I had to have money sometimes. And so I would go and I would sell tickets at the dog track window. And literally the way the West Memphis dog track was set up is people lined up and the managers knew what you looked like, and they would call who they wanted to work in. And then as the number of people that were showing up would go up, they would then pull in more people. And so I was a cashier selling, starting off with $2 tickets and ended up being moved pretty quickly to the $10 ticket area. And when I was working the $2 ticket area, every night I would have someone come up who was pulling change out of their pockets to make that last $2 ticket bet. And you were thinking, what are you going to do for food tomorrow?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from with that point, that it is a backdoor hidden tax, whatever you want to call it, deceitful tax. on people. But at the same time, like if it's going to other states, it's I'd rather see it compared. The problem I have is the last few bills that I've seen. Instead of it being a true education lottery, it's almost like a pyramid scheme where everybody's hands is in the cookie jar. Money's going everywhere, and it's not. Percentage of it is just going where they promised, and I, I that's something I don't want to see happen. Um, it's going to just too many places. So when like I said, we started going nationwide. When I asked you about being a contributor, and you said you didn't know because your law firm. I was asking you. I've asked other people. The issue I'm having is there's just ain't any Democrats left anymore. Because I was wanting to give a Democrat response to issues. In this last election, that was the worst Democratic ticket I've ever seen in Alabama. Is how does the Democratic Party come back to being viable in the state, or competitive, or can they?
They can. I think that the demographics are going to make a big difference. If you look at the age, and while it's not universal, younger people tend to be more Democrat. And so if you look at Georgia, North Carolina, 2 states right now, where you've got Democrats who are winning statewide, I think in 10 years from now, North Carolina and Georgia will go from being purple to blue, all right? And maybe 20 years, okay? It may take that long. And at the same time, Alabama will go from being red to purple.
Well, I read an article that they estimated in 12 years Alabama would be a purple state. And like you said, the demographics. I mean, because and the Republican Party has done nothing to reach out to. Like I was talking to a friend today. There's this black lady in Talladega, Republican conservative. I actually wrote an article about her, about how they treated her up there. And she said, basically, because she's black, really married to a white man. And when I got in touch with the party chair, I asked her, I said, look, I said, let me ask you a tough question. I said, is this because of racism? And she said, well, there's racism everywhere. I was like, wow, you just gave me a great quote. But what the point I'm getting is, why the Republicans have not reached out to more like black community? I mean, because they're very social on conservative issues, like the Republicans are. It seems like they could have made inroads there, more with the Latino community, but instead, it's like they double down on white males, and there's just not enough white males to elect them like there was in the past.
Well, I mean, I hear that, but Nikki Haley is probably the top Republican candidate for president right now, other than the guy whose name I don't often say.
Do you think that Nikki Haley, though, is going to motivate the Republican base to turn out like the man you don't say? I mean, I just don't see the motive, the fire getting behind her. Or like somebody said, her and Senator Scott, which on paper that sounds like an ideal ticket, but is the base really going to return out for that?
I can't predict those kind of things. I guess that's a good question. People are talking about the fact that Biden is not going to be able to turn people out. But depends on who he's running against. And maybe people turn out to vote against whoever he's running against if he's the Democratic nominee. So it's hard to say.
Well, I believe it was George Wallace who once said that people are more apt to vote against somebody than they are to vote for them.
Yeah, unfortunately, politics is a lot easier to use hate than it is to use love for your neighbor.
Yeah, and I'll keep you. I know you're a busy man. Just one thing I want to point out too. When I grew up, I remember that the Republicans and Democrats, they were friends. They reached across the aisle. They went out together to eat. And now there's so much division in this country. You're either right, left, and you hate the other side. Is there any way we can come back to the middle and say,
Well,
all right, we're all in this together, and
not, it's never going to be ideal. It's never going to be like you think it should be. But I think a lot of the extremism that you're seeing is going to be less important for the same reason for the demographics that you and I were talking about a few minutes ago. I think that people, I mean, my kids are all in their 30s now, and, you know, their age group is just never going to, as a overall majority of them are just not going to support the Republican Party.
um,
And the extremism. So the Republicans are going to have to moderate in order to survive, and they will.
are they ever going to go? I mean, issues like, like transgender issues. I mean, that's something that's affecting. You know, I think I've seen both Democrats and Republicans go to war over this. Our drag queen story hour. Are these things going to continue to go in this level? Or
I think that the cultural issues that the Republicans are pushing now are going to get old, and they're going to find something else.
Yeah, because it seems like that throughout the history that I've been alive. Well, of course, I don't remember the civil rights issue, but it's went from, one minority or one maligned group to the next, and will probably continue. Mr. Christie, I'm not going to keep you no longer. I've had you on the phone for an hour, and I know you've got a lot of work to do. I do thank you for this opportunity, for allowing me to talk to you. Sorry it took so long for us to get in touch, but I'll get this posted. I'll have a nice article written about you, and thank you for your time.
All right. Well, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris.